The Washington Commanders need to clean house. They need to fire everybody and restart. Now, I'm not saying right now. I'm just saying at some point this season, ideally before the end of this season. And at this point, I really do feel like it could happen any week. If Washington were to suffer some kind of tough loss, ownership might go ahead and just pull the trigger. At some point, you have to move on from Ron Rivera and general manager Martin Mayhew. And honestly, I hope it's before the end of the season so you can get a look at Eric Bieniemy as the interim head coach. But regardless, even if it does go through the end of the season, there's going to be a whole new group of people leading this team in 2024. Head coach Ron Rivera and general manager Martin Mayhew were both hired by Dan Snyder. Snyder sold the franchise to a Josh Harris-led group. So usually, when a team is sold, at some point, they just wipe the slate clean. And Washington definitely needs to. Luckily, with Josh Harris, this is not his first rodeo when it comes to leading organizations. He's the managing partner of the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils. He's also a general partner of Crystal Palace in the Premier League and is now a minority owner of Joe Gibbs Racing, which is honestly super cool to see just because obviously that was founded by Joe Gibbs and he manages that. Harris has been around and he's done this before, and this is a franchise where it's very, very clear that they need a reboot. Ron Rivera was hired to be the head coach of the then Redskins in 2020. Obviously, a lot has changed for the franchise since then, and I think that's something you have to at least give Ron Rivera his flowers for. He has led the charge for this franchise that's had a name change and an ownership change, and I will say, I do think next year they are going to change the name once again. It seems like Commanders was just rushed by Dan Snyder, which I agree with. Honestly, I really hope they go with the Red Hogs. It brings back some of that past. It starts with red. They used to be called the Hogs back in the day a little bit, that offensive line. I would love that name, but that's not the point. Rivera had all these changes, and he was really brought in to change the culture, and I do believe he actually did that. Rivera, in my mind, is going to go down as a very important head coach in the franchise's history for what he did off the field. But there was just never enough on the field. Now, I don't think it helped that Rivera did essentially just hire a bunch of his same staff from the Panthers that ultimately led to him getting fired for a reason. He coached Carolina for 9 seasons, and it's actually viewed pretty positively. A lot of that, I think, is just due to that 15-1 record Cam Newton MVP season back in 2015 that, of course, did end in a Super Bowl loss to the Broncos. Ron Rivera did only have 3 winning seasons in 9 years, and he hasn't had one in Washington. 2020 was a complete mess, but somehow Washington did actually make the playoffs after going 7-9. It was a bad season for the NFC East, clearly. Dwayne Haskins, Alex Smith, and Kyle Allen all started in the regular season. Then Taylor Heineke started in the wild card round, and, well, the Heineke magic just began from there, even though it really wasn't actually supposed to. Before then, Rivera was essentially like the de facto general manager, and then Commanders in 2021 decided to hire Martin Mayhew after the season to be the team's GM. He came from a front office role with the Niners, but in his one tenure he had previously as a GM for the Lions, and from 2008 to 2015, he was a complete disaster. I just never understood the hire, and he's somebody that's gotta go with Ron too, man. In 2021, Washington decided to sign Ryan Fitzpatrick to be the starter. He got hurt in week 1, and Taylor Heineke took over, and Washington finished 7-10. Then in 2022, Washington traded for Carson Wentz, who did play in 7 games, but he sucked. So Heineke played in 9. So it really was 2 straight years of Taylor Heineke. Sam Howell was also a rookie in 2022 and did get that start in week 18. Overall, Washington went 8-1. And now we fast forward to this season. Sam Howell is clearly the guy now. It's the first time it's actually felt like there's been some stability underneath center for Ron Rivera. Still a lot of questions with Sam Howell, but at the very least, you know who's going out there every single week. Washington is 4-6, and it really just feels like they should fire Ron Rivera here at some point. Defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio's gotta go with him. There's been a lot of good talent on this roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and it's just constantly struggled. It's not good enough, and that's a clear reflection of Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio. Now, an interesting name is offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. He was with the Chiefs from 2013 to 2022 and served as the offensive coordinator after Matt Nagy left. There have always been questions about his ability to be an NFL head coach and really just the weight that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes had on his success, but he certainly helped the Commanders' offense. I will say I'm not truly sure if I'm actually sold on Eric Bieniemy yet. That 7-point performance against the Giants still just really stings. I don't know how you can go into a game against the New York Giants, only score 7 points. New York only scored 14. They should have won that game. It's hurt a little bit since there, but looking away from that game, Eric Bieniemy has had some success here. He's been very intriguing. Clearly, he's played a huge role in the development of Sam Howell. I just think that if Ron Rivera gets the boot, I'd like to see Eric Bieniemy take over as the interim head coach so we can at least see him in the role. Maybe it's a mess. Maybe it goes well. I don't know. Maybe ownership wants to keep him around if he has some success, and maybe they just don't, and he can just go get a head coaching job somewhere else. Either way, I do just want to see him act as the head coach, and I think that's some extra motivation and reason to fire Ron Rivera before the end of the season. If Ron Rivera sticks around till the end of week 18 and then you finally cut him loose then who knows what Eric Bieniemy is going to look like. You're never going to truly get that look at him as a head coach, and he's probably just going to go off and go do his own thing, and they'll bring in all these new coaching staff. Of course, there's a possibility that ownership just loves Eric Bieniemy and wants to keep him around off the rip, but I just highly doubt that's the case. I want at some point to see Eric Bieniemy be the interim head coach, see what happens, see how he can lead this football team, and see if this is a guy that not only deserves a head coaching job, but maybe deserves one here in Washington, because clearly things have gone well with Sam Howell, and that is first and foremost the most important thing to this team, is him continuing to play well for the rest of this season, because he does still have things to prove, and he does still need to prove that he can be that franchise quarterback moving forward, and he has done that so far. He is kind of a rookie in a way. I mean, he is sort of taking that Patrick Mahomes route, played in the team's last regular season game as a rookie, and then took over as a starter the next season. Of course, comparing anybody to that Patrick Mahomes 2018 season would be nuts, but Sam Howell has played well, and he's thrown the ball a ton, and that has been by design. He currently leads the league with 2,783 passing yards. By the way, what if I had told you before this season that the league leaders in passing yards through week 10 would be Sam Howell and CJ Stroud? I would have been so confused, but they've both looked really good. Howell has thrown 17 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He's also rushed for a touchdown and has lost 2 fumbles. He really is just getting better every week. Just in the last 3 weeks, he's thrown 8 touchdowns. There was a while there where the big concern was sacks, and hey, Sam Howell needs to figure out these sacks. If he can be the franchise guy. Well, guess what? The sacks have been figured out. Compared to the beginning of the season to now, he is now getting sacked at a very average rate, if not even better. Now, I think that comes to do with Sam Howell. He actually is starting to mature there a little bit, but also there's been some switches on the offensive line, and that's helped a ton. And it's been clear that Howell's getting a little more help there. I just think Sam Howell truly is starting to play like a franchise quarterback, and he's who the new coaching staff and general manager have to build around. You have a quarterback. For the first time in what feels like forever since Kirk Cousins, you have a quarterback. Now, it's time to continue to develop him and build the roster around him. And that is job number 1 of the new staff. I appreciate everything Ron Rivera did in Washington and how much he helped Sam Howell and his development, but it's time to move on, and time is running out fast.